Hi everyone, Peter here from Flow High Performance, and in this video we'll be covering how to program speed training for field sport athletes. First, we need to establish what exactly we mean by speed training. Essentially, speed training refers to sprinting as fast as possible in a straight line. Speed training can be performed over various distances, although the effort must always be maximal. So the distances used for a particular speed training session will determine what speed the athlete reaches. Longer distances will allow greater speeds to be reached, while shorter distances will limit how fast the athlete can run. So why should field sport athletes perform specific speed training? There are two primary reasons that speed training may be beneficial for field sport athletes. The first and most important reason is for injury prevention purposes. Field sport athletes perform many sprints of varying distances during a competitive match. Of these sprints, most are at a sub-maximal effort, although there is always a proportion of sprints that are performed at maximal intensity. Therefore, athletes need to prepare for the demands of sprinting at maximal intensity. The only true way to prepare for this is to expose the athletes to maximal effort sprints regularly to allow the tissues to adapt to such extreme demands. By performing sprint training with gradually increasing intensity, we can acclimate the athletes to be robust to sprint-related injuries and to be able to tolerate the sprint demands of competitive sport. The second reason is to enhance sprint performance. Maximal effort sprinting is the most specific and most effective method of speed training. Simply put, the athletes must sprint to get faster. Resisted sprints can also be implemented as a method of speed development to emphasize acceleration ability. Now that we have covered the fundamentals of speed training, we can explore how to manipulate training variables to best achieve the desired goals. The first and most important variable for speed training is intensity. Intensity can be defined for this purpose as effort, or in other words, how fast relative to the athlete's maximum effort is performed. For speed training, intensity should always be maximal. Sprinting with maximal effort is the most effective way to reduce injury risk and improve performance. This is because the athlete must learn how to coordinate and contract their muscles at extremely fast velocities. Without putting maximal effort into a sprint, the athlete won't be performing the most specific training that they could be. The next variable to consider for sprint training programming is volume. This can be defined as how many sprints are performed per session or per week. Volume for sprint training doesn't need to be high for field sport athletes, since they perform hundreds of other sprints during sport practice and competitive matches. So sprint training for these athletes is about reaching maximal intensity rather than to accumulate volume. Generally, the first 2 to 4 maximal effort sprints an athlete performs are their fastest times. After this, sprint times slowly begin to diminish. Once sprint times begin to slow down, the session should be stopped as the athlete is no longer able to sprint at the necessary speeds to achieve the adaptations that we're after. The last important variable for speed training is rest times. Simply put, athletes need to allow full recovery between sprints to ensure maximal sprint speed. This exact time may vary from athlete to athlete, but a general rule is to allow at least 1 minute of recovery for every 10 meters the athlete sprints. Now that we have explored how training variables should be adjusted for speed training, we can begin to explore how to implement this into a program. There are two primary programming strategies that can be implemented for athletes. The first is an acclimation protocol. An acclimation protocol is where sprint training gradually increases in velocity over time. The reason an acclimation phase should be implemented is to reduce the athlete's risk of injury. If they immediately begin running at maximum velocity, the athlete likely hasn't been exposed to such a stress for quite some time. Therefore, the athlete will be at a heightened risk of injury. By gradually increasing velocity over time, the athlete will slowly adapt to the stress of sprinting and become more robust. So how would this look from a programming perspective? Essentially, we want the athlete to start with shorter distance sprints, which will limit how fast they will run. Distances of around 10 to 15 meters are a good starting point for speed training. Effort should still be maximal, but because the distances are short, the athlete won't reach fast speeds. Then, they can increase the distances slowly over time to around 40 to 50 meters, which will allow them to reach maximum velocity. This acclimation period should be performed in the off-season and pre-season periods to be ready for the competitive season. Practically, this may look something like this. We start the first 4-week mesocycle with 3 to 5 sprints with distances of 10 meters increasing to 17.5 meters. In the second mesocycle, the distances increase further up to 27.5 meters, still increasing the distance by 2.5 meters each week. In the third mesocycle, the distances increase from 27.5 to 37.5 meters. And in the final mesocycle, the distances increase up to 47.5 meters. This will allow the athletes to very gradually acclimate to maximum velocity sprinting over a 16-week period. The second programming strategy to implement is to provide regular exposure to maximum velocity sprinting. This simply means that once the athletes have gone through an acclimation protocol, they need to maintain this form by continuing to sprint at maximum velocity regularly. Maximum velocity sprinting should be exposed once every 7 to 10 days to ensure qualities are being maintained. These sprints should allow top speeds to be reached, meaning that they should be around 40 to 50 meters in length. By regularly exposing athletes to maximum velocity sprinting, it should help maintain the adaptations that we previously established. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already.